Yep.
Okay, we're recording this session. This will be a little bit of a short session on value flows, and we're going to focus on the contributory economy and the value flows. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I guess I could make this presentation or something, but can y'all see that well enough?
Very well.
So this is a little cartoon that's a simplified version of a Sensorica actual situation from a few years ago. And we're going to look at making stuff and then selling it and then distributing the income back to the people who contributed. So now that we can hear each other this time, feel free to ask questions any old time or make comments or whatever. So this is up at the top. You've got a couple people who went in together and purchased a 3D printer, and then really there were, I think, 12 people that put in $100 or a few $100 or something, and they got themselves a nice 3D printer. Then you need to have like this polymer resin stuff to make things out of. And in Sensorica, they don't like have cash sitting around as a group, so pretty much somebody generally purchases materials or components or whatever. So this little guy on the bottom did that. And then he's also the designer, so he designed a 3D printed part. Work is the event going into that. Designing it is the process. The two things above are transfers, they're purchases. And he creates a design for a part. And so now they're all ready to make something using that design. They're using, so here's another set of events. They're using the 3D printer resource. They're consuming the polymer resource. They're citing the design that hooks up those processes so that the value flow will work. It's like a scientific citation or an academic citation kind of a thing. And somebody is going to do some work to make the part. When the use event makes the printer unavailable but doesn't decrement that resource at all, the consume event decrements the amount of polymer they're going to use. Cites doesn't do much of anything to the design resource because it's electronic, so anybody else can use it or cite it or whatever, however many times anybody wants. And work. Okay, so all of that goes into making a 3D printed part, and there it is, which is a process with an output. So that little arrow without the label at the end would be produce. Questions so far?
Yeah, I have a question about the use of the 3D printer. Because unfortunately, most of the machines that we have these days, at least that we're able to purchase, don't have a very long lifetime usefulness. Like they often break or at least get worse over time pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So is there a way here in the use to account for depreciation where after 10,000 prints, for example, you're going to have to buy a new 3D printer?
Right. Not really, but you certainly could account for that and just keep track on your uses. Like people do that for doing preventative maintenances and stuff too. After so many whatevers, we need to do.
Can I
Bob?
pop something in?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we actually have an ongoing conversation about that with a guy that's in construction who's real interested in how we're going to do depreciation of equipment. He's got some stuff out there about both depreciation depreciation of equipment and also risks that are encountered in these various things. We haven't gone through it in great detail yet, but if he stays in the mix, I don't know if he will, then we may do something with him to detail that out. But it's definitely doable to deal with both the expected life of equipment and and of course you keep track of the uses. That's tracked anyway,
Right.
so you can use those in figuring out what is the risk of this piece of equipment dying on us at time X. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing about that is that oops, I probably should have muted while Bob was talking. Is that you can use whatever unit of measure you want to record these things. So if you want to record number of impressions or whatever, I don't know what they do on 3D printers as your use, you could do that, or you could record number of hours or whatever makes the most sense for those kinds of considerations. And one more just thing to say on the sites input. So people, I think we'll need a lot more just experience to see how people want to do this. It's hard to figure out the unit of measure and how to quantify that. What Sensorica decided to do was to use a percentage of the process. So the people that are working on a process can say, wow, that design or that idea or whatever contributed to this particular process X%. So whatever comes back the other way, they're going to get X% of it. So that was their thought. Okay. Anything else before I flip to number 2?
Yep.
So they shipped the part. Some customer, I mean, just to note, like this example is not like a whole economy, obviously. This is like a group interfacing into the market economy that we have. And so that you'll kind of see that in this example, but that obviously would not have to be. Anyway, they deliver this part to somebody. They get paid some money, transfer back of money. They receive that payment, and then they want to distribute the money. So the group that does the work on this project, let's call them the 3D printer project, has created for themselves a value equation, which is just an agreement between them for how they want to distribute income. And it has all the rules and math and whatever you need to do that. And so the distribution process combines the value equation with what it knows from this chain of events here. So it can figure out, yeah, we used a 3D printer, and here's the people who put money towards the printer, and they're going to get a little small percentage of something, each of them, and gradually that'll pay them back for the money they fronted for the printer, and the resin will get paid for because it just needs to. And the design will kind of slowly accrue some income, and somebody will get paid for doing some work. And that's all shown here. So here's the guy who did the work, who gets some income because he made the part. Here's a guy who did the design and paid for the polymer, so he got paid back for the polymer and got paid something for the design. And here's the guy who, one of the guys who helped buy the printer, and here's another guy who helped buy the printer. And by the way, he did some accounting and cleaned the lab, so according to their value equation, he's going to get a little piece for that too. So that's the scenario. Questions?
No, that's very clear.
Okay.
Maybe could you talk a little bit about the value equation and like how that is created and what are the assumptions there?
Yeah, that was sort of a Sensorica invention, I think, and we kind of worked through them and created a somewhat complex piece of software because they had all kinds of stuff they wanted to do. It could be complex or not. Like Fair Co-op just counts up everybody's hours for the month, multiplies it times certain euros or fair coins per hour, and pays it out. And that's what they do. These guys, the value equation for these guys has buckets that all add up to 100% of the distribution. And for example, the first bucket just gives 5% to Sensorica. It's just kind of the overhead for administration and the lab and whatever. And then they have these rules based on type of work, based on type of contribution that can each have a formula. So like if this guy worked 5 hours, the formula might say, well, he gets 20 Canadian dollars per hour, and so he's in for $100 or whatever. The formula for people getting paid back for contributing for the printer might be some like really small percentage of what they contributed or something. And then the value equation will also kind of top it out and not pay more than it can, right? And kind of decrease everybody's share or not decrease some people's share. Maybe the polymer just needs to get paid no matter what, right?
Mm-hmm. So these rules are completely up to the group.
I'm sorry?
Those rules, that equation is completely up to the group to define just based on analyzing the flows. Right?
Yep. We can show you excruciating detail on that if you like, or give you a link later too, and you can look at the excruciating detail yourself. But yeah, it's totally up to them to define. In this situation, it's theoretically democratically decided. Often somebody does a lot of that work, and right, there's all kinds of actual nuances to that, as with any democratic style governance, and each project gets to decide their own value equation. So like
right.
The distribution, if this guy, this is like a really simplified version, but just say like this design was done as part of a different project, which we consider to be an agent, or they consider to be an agent. Then the distribution would, when it hits that boundary, which we call the scope, it would just, instead of assuming that they're using the same value equation, well, first it checks, and if they are, that's fine. But if they're not, it just dumps that portion of the distribution into that project, and then they can distribute that themselves based on their own value equation. And this is not prescriptive. This is kind of how one group decide to do it, right? And not everybody even wants to do a contributory economy and et cetera. So it's kind of more to see how the value flows and just to understand that the software needs to be able to trace this stuff backwards. As far as the trail goes, right? And people inputting the data need to create those links, So if you don't log your output, there's going to be a break here or something like that, Of course. Yeah, please.
Okay, I just wanted to say that there is a slide deck explaining all of the design and use of the value equation in quite a lot of detail with results and so on. Another part of that is that it's used. It has like a little sandbox playground set up, so you can try it without actually distributing money, which I think is necessary for this kind of thing. And then there's also a document describing the algorithm behind this in quite a lot of detail, and the code is also available.
Awesome. Yeah, could you send a link to that?
Yeah. Yep. Either Bob can do it now or we'll catch you afterwards. I don't think I can this very minute because I'm sharing and whatever. Ooh, did I ever hit record? Good. Okay. The other thing, yeah, well, I can't be in that right this minute. Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, this is another sort of view of the same kind of thing, which shows the pieces of the puzzle a little more clearly that we could look up briefly. So we have resources, we have events, and we have processes. And the agents are in there. They're just not in this picture. Anything that goes in or out of a process is an event, and events affect resources. Excuse me, or not. You know, they can decrement, they can increment, or they can do nothing, as in the case of the citation. So this is kind of what it looks like as the pieces of the puzzle. Good? Okay. I'm going to stop the share.
What's the reputation means, Lynn?
Oh, reputation means, like, we don't have anything formally in the software for that. Exactly. But the thought was that as, say, for example, you're using somebody's design, you can say, oh, that design was really great. That was done really well. You know, that reputation kind of flows backwards. Or you could say, hey, this component that you made actually didn't work, bad quality output. That reputation can flow backwards. Or you can look at data to know, let's say somebody said they were going to deliver something that you needed today, but it's not done until tomorrow. That's another piece of reputation. So there's pieces there, but there's no reputation system, quote unquote.
Okay.
And a lot of people talk about reputation. Some people talk about it like it's a resource itself, which we've never quite seen. But a lot of people are interested in it, and clearly we need some kinds of things for reputation. But that's not in the model, and it's not in ValueFlows. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions? Otherwise, I'll hit the stop button.
No, that was very clear. Thank you.